Welcome to another exciting werewolf shifter romance audiobook, The Wolf's Love Triangle, rejected by the Alpha, a Luna M. Rose romance collection. Chapter 1. The scent of aging paper and freshly brewed coffee hung in the air, a familiar perfume that had soothed Isla's soul on more occasions than she could count. She was curled into a worn armchair in the quietest corner of The Burrow, a small independent bookstore that felt more like a sanctuary than a shop. The low hum of a coffee machine and the soft rustle of turning pages were the only sounds that broke the peaceful silence. Outside, the world of her pack, the Blackwood pack, bustled with preparations for the quarterly mating hunt, a tradition she found increasingly archaic and suffocating. Here, nestled among stories of other worlds, she could almost forget the weight of expectation that settled on her shoulders like a physical cloak. She traced the embossed silver title on the hardcover book in her lap, Faded Hearts. A bitter, ironic smile touched her lips. She'd bought it on a whim, a masochistic impulse to read about a love so certain and destined when her own life felt like a rudderless ship in a vast, empty ocean. Maybe in the next lifetime, she whispered to the silent room, the words a familiar, hopeless mantra. The flicker of hope she once nurtured for her own fated mate had long since dwindled to a cold, gray ember in her chest. Her phone, lying face down on the small table beside her, buzzed insistently. She knew without looking it was another notification from the pack's official dating app, a well-meaning but ultimately soul-crushing attempt by the elders to pair the unmated wolves before they were deemed past their prime. With a sigh that seemed to pull all the energy from her body, she turned it over. Mason. Hey, saw your profile. You look fierce. Want to grab a bite? She cringed. Fierce. It was the word every male wolf used when they didn't know what else to say. It meant she wasn't delicate, wasn't submissive, wasn't the ideal, pliable mate. Her thumb swiped the notification away without a second thought. Another message that felt like a template, a fill-in-the-blanks attempt at connection. She reluctantly opened the app, her own profile picture staring back at her. A forced smile, eyes that didn't quite sparkle. She scrolled through the endless parade of profiles. Alphas posed with their recent kills, muscles bulging and expressions stern. Betas offered polite, safe smiles, their profiles listing respectable pack jobs and a fondness for long walks. Omegas wrote lengthy bios promising loyalty and a nurturing spirit. None of it felt real. It was a marketplace, and she was just another piece of merchandise nearing her expiration date. Her thumb hovered over the Delete App button, a tempting red beacon of freedom. What is the point of all this? The thought was a scream in the quiet of her mind. A soft cough pulled her from her spiraling thoughts. The young waiter, a sweet Omega named Finn, stood by her table, his expression gentle. He asked, his voice barely a whisper, "Another chamomile tea, Isla?" In her chaotic theater of her mind, she heard herself say, "No, Finn. I need a mate. A real one, a fated mate who will see me and not just a space beside him that needs filling." The thought was so vivid, so desperate, that for a terrifying second, she thought she'd said it aloud. A hot flush of panic crept up her neck. "No, thank you, Finn. I'm fine," she mumbled, forcing a weak smile and sinking deeper into the armchair, hoping it might swallow her whole. He gave a polite, understanding nod and glided away. Isla let out a shaky breath, her cheeks burning with a phantom embarrassment. She stared out the large bay window, watching couples pass by, their hands linked, their laughter a sound from a foreign language she couldn't comprehend. Why was it so easy for them and so impossible for her? "Fated mates, huh?" A voice rumbled from beside her, so close it made her jump. It was a low, confident sound, laced with an undeniable amusement. A little on the nose for a place like this, don't you think? Isla's head snapped up, her heart hammering against her ribs. A man stood there, leaning against a bookshelf with an easy grace that was both captivating and infuriating. He wasn't just handsome, he was sculpted, as if a god had taken a particular interest in carving the sharp line of his jaw and the broad set of his shoulders. His eyes, a startling shade of crystalline blue, were alight with a mischievous intelligence that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed walls. His dark hair was perfectly, artfully messy, and a smirk played on his lips as if he were privy to the world's most entertaining secret. He radiated power, the untamed, unapologetic energy of a true alpha. "Excuse me?" Isla managed, her voice coming out breathier than she intended. She clutched her book to her chest like a shield. He chuckled, the sound a low, pleasant vibration in the quiet room. "I didn't mean to startle you," he said, though the tinkle in his eyes suggested he meant exactly that. "I just couldn't help but notice your literary selection. A bit of a romantic, are you?" He pushed off the bookshelf and extended a hand, his movements fluid and predatory. "The name's Carter." She stared at his outstretched hand for a beat too long, her mind racing. He was from her pack. She'd seen him at gatherings, the heir to the alpha position, always surrounded by a crowd of admirers. He was the sun, and she was a forgotten shadow. She finally placed her hand in his. A jolt, hot and electric, shot up her arm. His grip was warm, firm, and overwhelmingly confident. "Isla," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Pleasure, Isla." His thumb brushed lightly over her knuckles before he let go. He gestured with his chin to the empty plush chair across from her small table. "Mind if I ruin your peaceful afternoon?" Before she could formulate a polite refusal, he slid into the seat, making the cozy nook feel suddenly small and charged with energy. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his intense gaze unwavering. "So, you actually believe in all that? One true mate, written in the stars, the whole cosmic destiny package?" Isla felt a familiar prickle of defensiveness rise. It was the same condescending tone she had heard 100 times. "Maybe I do," she countered, lifting her chin. "You think it's silly?" "Silly? No," he said, surprising her. He leaned back, crossing his arms over his broad chest. "I think it's a nice story people tell themselves so they don't have to go out and make any hard choices. It's a convenient excuse for sitting around and waiting." His eyes roamed her face, analytical and bold. Why wait for fate to hand you something when you can go out and take what you want? His arrogance was astounding, yet there was a challenging glint in his eye that she found annoyingly captivating. "Maybe what I want is fate," she shot back, surprised by her own boldness. "Maybe I want something real, not just something taken." Carter's smirk widened into a full, devastating grin. It transformed his face, making him look both boyish and dangerous. "And what if I told you," he said, leaning forward again, his voice a low, intimate growl, "that fate just sat down across from you?" Her breath hitched. The sheer audacity of it left her speechless. He was a force of nature, a storm she hadn't seen coming. He wasn't like the flat, one-dimensional profiles on the app. He was real, intense, and he was challenging every lonely notion she'd ever held. He reached into the inner pocket of his leather jacket, pulled out a sleek black pen, and with a flourish grabbed a clean napkin from the dispenser on the table. He scribbled a series of digits with sharp, decisive strokes. He slid the napkin across the polished wood surface. It stopped just short of her teacup. "Here's my number," he said, his blue eyes locking with hers. "Call me when you're ready to stop waiting for destiny and start making your own." He stood, gave her a lazy, confident wink, and walked out of the bookstore, leaving Isla staring at the napkin, her heart pounding a wild, unfamiliar rhythm in the sudden, deafening silence. Chapter 2. Isla stared at the number scrawled on the napkin in Carter's bold, aggressive handwriting. For a full 10 minutes after he left, she simply sat there, the bookstore's quiet ambiance a stark contrast to the hurricane of thoughts raging inside her. His confidence was an intoxicant, his words a direct challenge to the passive, hopeful life she'd resigned herself to. Her fingers trembling slightly reached for the napkin. The paper was flimsy, but the number on it felt heavy, like a key to a door she was terrified to open. "This is insane," a cautious voice in her head whispered. He's the future Alpha. He could have anyone. This is a game to him. But another voice, a wilder, more reckless one, that sounded suspiciously like her own dormant wolf, purred, "What if it isn't?" Before the cautious voice could win, she grabbed her phone. With fumbling fingers, she typed in the number and pressed the call button. The phone barely completed its first ring before a wave of pure, unadulterated panic washed over her. "What am I doing?" She frantically jabbed the screen to end the call, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She sighed, frustrated with her own cowardice, and was about to put the phone away when it lit up, vibrating against the table. The name Carter flashed in stark white letters. He was calling her back. A fresh surge of adrenaline shot through her. She let it ring once, twice, her mind a blank slate of terror and excitement. On the third ring, she took a deep, shuddering breath and answered. "Hello?" she managed, her voice a squeak. That was fast. Carter's smooth, teasing voice slid through the speaker, as if he'd been expecting her call all along. "Couldn't wait to hear my voice again, could you, Isla?" Isla felt a hot blush creep up her neck and spread across her cheeks. I called by accident," she stammered, the lie flimsy even to her own ears. He chuckled, a low, warm sound that did strange things to her insides. "Sure you did. My irresistible alpha charm strikes again. It's a heavy burden, but someone's got to bear it." "Please," she scoffed, finding a sliver of her composure. A smile tugged of her lips to spite herself. "You probably use that line on every wolf who accidentally dials your number." "Only the ones I find reading cheesy romance novels in dusty corners of bookstores," he shot back playfully, his tone intimate and warm. There was a brief pause before his voice shifted, becoming more direct, shedding the teasing layer for something more serious. "Listen, I want to see you again. No games. Dinner tomorrow? 8 o'clock? There's a place downtown, the Azure Lantern. I'll make a reservation." Her heart did a frantic leap. It was so fast, so decisive, so Carter. He wasn't asking, he was planning. He was acting. "Yeah," she said, trying to inject a note of casualness into her voice that she was far from feeling. "Yeah, sounds good." "Great," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I'll pick you up. Don't keep me waiting." The call ended, and Isla stared at her phone, the screen now dark. A whirlwind of nerves, excitement, and sheer terror churned inside her. She had a date with Carter. The next evening, her bedroom looked as though a tornado had ripped through a high-end boutique. Dresses, skirts, and blouses were strewn across her bed, chairs, and floor. "I have nothing to wear," she groaned for what felt like the 100th time, holding up a simple but elegant black dress and scowling at her reflection. Her best friend, Chloe, was lounging on the bed amidst the chaos, scrolling through her phone with an air of profound amusement. "Isla, you're being ridiculous," she said without looking up. "You look amazing in everything. He's an alpha, not the fashion police. It's just a dinner." "But it's not just a dinner, Chloe," Isla exclaimed, tossing the dress onto the growing pile. "It's Carter. The Carter. Do you know the rumors about him? He dates pack princesses and the daughters of visiting dignitaries. He doesn't date me." Chloe finally set her phone down and sat up, her expression softening. "Okay, first of all, stop that. You are a catch. You're smart, you're beautiful, and your wolf has a heart of gold. Second, the rumors are just that. Rumors. And third, maybe he's tired of pack princesses. Maybe he wants someone real." She got up and began sifting through the discarded clothes with a practiced eye. "You're overthinking this. He asked you out, the girl in the bookstore. Not some idealized version of a perfect Luna. So be that girl." After another 30 minutes of debate, Chloe pulled out a dress Isla had bought months ago but had never had the courage to wear. It was a deep, wine-red silk that hugged her curves in all the right places without being revealing. It felt bold, sensual, and powerful, everything she wanted to be in that moment. As she slipped it on and looked in the mirror, she saw a flicker of determination in her own eyes that replaced the usual uncertainty. "Okay," she breathed. "This one." At precisely 8 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Carter stood on her doorstep, looking even more devastatingly handsome than he had in the bookstore. He was dressed in a tailored dark suit, no tie, the top buttons of his crisp white shirt undone, exuding a raw, magnetic power that made the air in the hallway crackle. His eyes raked over her, from her hair to her heels, and the appreciative glint in them sent a fresh wave of heat through her. "Wow," he said, his voice a low murmur. "The bookstore girl cleans up nice." He took her to the Azure Lantern, an exclusive rooftop restaurant that overlooked the city, the endless sea of lights twinkling below them like a fallen constellation. The conversation flowed more easily than she ever could have imagined. It was filled with his signature teasing banter, but she found herself giving as good as she got, their words a playful dance of wit and flirtation. Yet underneath it all, she could feel a powerful current pulling them together, a tangible connection that was both exhilarating and terrifying. As the main course was cleared away, he grew more serious. "So, tell me, Isla," he said, leaning forward, his voice lowering. "What does the girl who reads about fated mates want out of life, besides destiny dropping into her lap, of course?" She smiled, feeling more comfortable than she had in years. "I want to matter," she admitted softly. "I want to do something that makes a difference, even a small one, not just be someone's mate." His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were fixed on her. "I have to admit, I'm a little stunned. You're not at all what I expected." "And what did you expect?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. "I don't know. Someone quieter, maybe. More easily impressed." He reached across the table, his fingers lightly brushing against hers. The contact was electric. "You have a fire in you. I like it." The playful bad boy from the bookstore had vanished, replaced by someone more intense, more complex, more real. His gaze was so focused, so consuming, it felt like they were the only two people on the planet. As he walked her to her door later that night, the comfortable silence between them hummed with unspoken tension. He stopped in front of her door, turning to face her under the soft glow of the porch light. He reached out, his movements slow and deliberate, and brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering on her cheek, his thumb stroking her skin gently. "Is this real?" she whispered, her breath catching in her throat, the question echoing her own disbelief. His eyes, dark and impossibly deep in the dim light, locked onto hers. "It feels real," he murmured, his voice husky. "And you have no idea what you do to me, Isla." Her heart hammered in her chest as he leaned in, his other hand coming up to cup her jaw, closing the small distance between them until his lips were just a breath from hers. Chapter 3. The next 3 months passed in a blissful whirlwind haze. Isla, who had spent years feeling invisible, suddenly found herself at the center of the universe, or at least at the center of Carter's. They were inseparable. He introduced her to his world of pack politics and alpha duties, and she, in turn, showed him her world of quiet bookstores and hidden waterfalls. They were the pack's new, unexpected power couple, and for the first time in her life, Isla felt like she truly belonged. The gnawing loneliness that had been her constant companion for so long was a distant, faded memory. Carter made her feel safe, cherished, and breathtakingly alive. He made her feel whole. "You're not just glowing, you're practically a supernova," Chloe had teased her over coffee just last week. She'd propped her chin on her hands, a wide, genuine smile on her face. "I've never, ever seen you this happy, Mila. It's like you're a different person." "I am a different person," Isla had replied, her voice soft and dreamy as she stirred her latte, her thoughts on Carter. "Things are perfect. He's everything I never let myself believe I could have." But perfection, she was beginning to learn, was a fragile, fleeting thing. Over the past few weeks, a subtle, almost imperceptible distance had begun to creep in between them. It started with small things. Carter would be on his phone constantly, his brow furrowed in concentration over what he dismissed as pack business. He missed a dinner date, apologizing profusely with a bouquet of rare moon orchids the next day. But the sting of his absence lingered. He grew quiet and evasive whenever she tried to bring up their future, deflecting her questions with a passionate kiss or a vague promise to talk about it later when things aren't so crazy. The physical intimacy was still there, as intoxicating as ever, but an emotional chasm was slowly opening between them, and Isla felt herself standing on the edge, terrified of falling in. He's the future Alpha, Isla. He's under an insane amount of pressure from his father and the council. Maybe you just need to give him some space. Isla tried to believe it. She wanted to believe it, but a cold knot of anxiety tightened in her chest, a feeling she couldn't shake. She could feel him pulling away, constructing a wall around himself brick by painstaking brick, and she couldn't find a way to climb it. Her own wolf, which had once purred with contentment in his presence, grew restless and agitated, pacing the confines of her soul, sensing something was fundamentally wrong. One cool autumn evening, he sent her a terse text. "Meet me at my house. We need to talk." Her heart fluttered with a toxic cocktail of hope and dread. This is it, she thought. He's going to explain everything. We're going to fix this. She went, convincing herself that their love was strong enough to weather any storm. He opened the door and her fragile hope immediately withered. His expression was unreadable, his handsome face a blank mask, but his eyes were distant, as if he were looking at a stranger. He led her into his large, impeccably decorated living room, the space where they had cuddled by the fire and shared their dreams, now feeling cold and alien. The silence was heavy, suffocating. She sat on the edge of the plush sofa, her hands twisted into a knot in her lap. "Isla," he began, his voice strained as he remained standing, pacing in front of the massive stone fireplace. "I've been doing a lot of thinking." He finally stopped, turning to face her, but his gaze was fixed somewhere over her shoulder. "About us, about the pack, about my duties as the future Alpha." "What do you mean, Carter?" she asked, her own voice a fragile whisper. She could feel the floor giving way beneath her. He finally looked at her, and the regret in his eyes was so profound it was like a physical blow. But there was something else there too, a chilling resolve. "I can't do this anymore," he said, the words precise and devastating. "The pack, my father, the council, they require a certain kind of Luna. Someone with political lineage, someone who can form alliances, someone stronger, more ruthless." He took a breath, and the next words shattered what was left of her heart. "You're a distraction, Isla, a beautiful, wonderful distraction, but one I no longer afford. I'm sorry." Distraction? Not strong enough? The words echoed in the sudden, ringing silence of the room. They didn't make sense. Her mind scrambled to catch up, to process the sheer brutality of his statement. She stared at him, her vision blurring with unshed tears. She wanted to scream, to rage, to demand a better explanation, but all that came out was a choked, disbelieving whisper. You're breaking up with me?" "I think it's for the best," he said, his voice turning cold, clinical. He was no longer the man who had wooed her in the bookstore. He was the Alpha, making a calculated, strategic decision. "I can't be what you need, and you can't be what the pack needs me to have." A raw, guttural sob escaped her lips. The pain was immense, a physical agony that started in her chest and spread through her entire body. She staggered to her feet, her body shaking with the force of her heartbreak. "You don't get to decide what I need," she snapped, her voice thick and broken. "You don't get to build me up just to tell me I'm not good enough. Was any of it real, Carter, or was I just a pleasant diversion until you got bored?" He flinched, a flicker of pain crossing his own face before the mask of the Alpha slammed back into place. "It was real," he said quietly. "That's what makes this so hard." She stared at him, searching for any sign of the man she loved, but he was gone, replaced by this cold, resolute stranger. He was rejecting her. After everything, he was casting her aside like she was nothing, like she was a liability. The perfect world she had so foolishly allowed herself to believe in had not just shattered, it had been incinerated, leaving nothing but ash. She turned and stumbled towards the door, each step a monumental effort. She didn't look back. She couldn't. As the heavy oak door clicked shut behind her, the sound was deafening, a final, brutal judgment on her worth. The crisp night air swallowed her whole, cold and suffocating, as her heart, her soul, and her wolf cracked wide open. Chapter 4. The world outside Carter's perfectly manicured property was a blur of streetlights and shadows. Isla drove, her hands locked on the steering wheel in a white-knuckled grip, tears streaming down her face so thick and fast she could barely see the road ahead. She had no destination, no plan. She was simply fleeing, trying to outrun the searing pain that was chasing her down. His words echoed in her mind, a torturous loop of rejection, a distraction, not strong enough. I can't be what you need. Each phrase was a fresh dagger to her heart. Memories, once a source of blissful joy, now felt like instruments of torture. Their first kiss on her doorstep, the lazy Sunday mornings spent tangled in his sheets, the way he'd look at her across a crowded room as if she were the only person there. Had it all been a lie? A calculated performance? Her wolf, which had been so vibrant and joyful, was now a whimpering, wounded thing curled in the darkest corner of her soul, refusing to surface. Hours later, the sky beginning to lighten from inky black to a bruised purple, she found herself on a familiar dirt track deep in the neutral forest lands that bordered our territory. She didn't remember deciding to come here, but her subconscious had led her to the one place she'd always gone for solace, a secluded waterfall that cascaded over a cliff of mossy rocks into a crystal-clear pool below. It was her sanctuary. She stumbled out of the car, her limbs stiff and cold. The sound of the crashing water, usually so peaceful, now seemed to mock her, echoing the violent storm raging inside her. She collapsed onto a large flat rock at the water's edge, the one she'd claimed as her own since she was a pup, and finally let the full weight of her grief consume her. She hugged her knees to her chest and sobbed, the raw, ugly sounds torn from her throat, lost in the roar of the falls. What did she do wrong? Why wasn't she enough? The questions were a relentless assault, clawing away at the last remnants of her self-worth. A twig snapped nearby. The sound was sharp, out of place in the rhythmic symphony of the waterfall. Isla's head shut up, her senses on high alert. Her tear-filled eyes scanned the misty clearing, and she saw him. A man stood near the tree line, his presence quiet but undeniably powerful. He wasn't from her pack. She would have recognized him. His calm, intelligent gray eyes took in the scene, her disheveled state, the tear tracks on her face, without a hint of judgment or pity. He was tall and well-built, with dark, wavy hair and a strong, steady posture that was the complete opposite of Carter's restless, predatory energy. He looked like an oak tree, grounded, solid, ancient.
"My apologies. I didn't mean to intrude," he said, his voice a calm, even baritone that cut through the noise of the water. "This is usually a deserted spot." Isla hastily wiped at her tear-streaked face with the back of her hand, a fresh wave of humiliation washing over her. "It's fine," she choked out, her voice raspy. I was just leaving." She made to stand, wanting nothing more than to flee from the gaze of this stranger. "You don't have to," he said, his tone gentle. He took a few steps closer and sat on a fallen log, maintaining a respectful distance. The waterfall is big enough for two broken hearts. He offered a small, sad smile that seemed to hold a genuine empathy. She stared at him, surprised by his frankness and the lack of predatory interest in his eyes. He wasn't assessing her as a potential mate. He was simply seeing her as a person in pain. "You too?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. He nodded, his gaze shifting to the powerful cascade of water. "I just lost a business deal I've been working on for nearly a year. A rival pack swooped in at the last minute." I let out a soft, humorless laugh. "Sometimes things just don't go your way, no matter how meticulously you plan." He looked back at her, his gray eyes holding a quiet wisdom. "I'm Ezra." "Isla," she whispered, the name feeling foreign on her tongue. They sat in a surprisingly comfortable silence for a long while, the roar of the waterfall filling the space between them. He didn't push her to talk. He simply sat, sharing the space, his calm presence a strange and unexpected comfort. Finally, he spoke again. "It's none of my business," he started, his voice soft. "But whatever has brought you to this point, crying by a waterfall in the middle of nowhere seems like a pretty good way to handle it." His tone was light, completely devoid of the pity she dreaded. For the first time since Carter had shattered her world, A tiny, fragile smile broke through her grief. "Is that your expert opinion on heartbreak?" He chuckled softly, this sound pleasant and grounding. "My expert opinion is that talking sometimes helps more. But I'm just a stranger with a failed business deal. What do I know?" He rose to his feet in one fluid motion. "Well, Isla, it wasn't a pleasure to meet you under these circumstances, but I am glad our paths crossed." He gave her one last kind glance that felt like a balm on her wounded spirit. "I hope your heart heals faster than my business portfolio." He turned and walked back towards the trees, disappearing as quietly as he had arrived. Isla watched him go, a strange sense of calm settling over her. He hadn't offered solutions or empty platitudes. He had simply offered his presence, a moment of shared, quiet despair. His steadfast strength was a stark, soothing contrast to the whirlwind of chaos that Carter had left in his wake. Chapter 5. "We need to leave, Ezra. The Council of Alphas is expecting a full report on the trade negotiations by week's end." Marcus, Ezra's beta and oldest friend, stood in the doorway of the rustic cabin they had rented for their business trip. His arms were crossed, his expression a mixture of impatience and concern.
Ezra, Alpha of the formidable Crescent Moon Pack, stood staring out the large window, his gaze fixed on the dense forest, his thoughts miles away back at the misty waterfall. The image of the heartbroken girl, Isla, was imprinted on his mind. Her pain had been so raw, so palpable. It had resonated with a part of him he kept carefully guarded. "Delay our departure, Marcus," Ezra said, his voice quiet but firm, not turning from the window. "Something's come up." Marcus sighed, a sound of long-suffering familiarity. "Something or someone. I saw the way you were looking when you came back this morning. Don't tell me you found another stray to rescue." Ezra finally turned, a faint, unreadable smile on his lips. "She's from the Blackwood Pack." Marcus's eyebrows shot up in alarm. "Blackwood? Ezra, that's Carter's pack. You know the history between us. Our rivalry with them is older than we are. Getting involved with one of theirs is unwise." Ezra was known throughout the territories for his strategic mind and preternaturally calm leadership, a stark contrast to Carter, who was known for his hot-headed aggression and ruling with an iron fist, much like his father before him. The Crescent Moon and Blackwood Packs had been rivals for generations, locked in a cold war over disputed territory and deeply opposing ideologies on pack governance. "Which is precisely why I find it so interesting," he mused, his mind already working, fitting pieces of a puzzle together. He sat down at the heavy wooden table. "I have a job for you, my friend, a discreet one. Find out everything you can about a wolf named Isla from the Blackwood Pack. I want to know her rank, her family, her history, and why she would have been crying her heart out alone in the woods at dawn." Later that day, after Marcus had begun his subtle inquiries, Ezra took a walk along the disputed border, a collection of antique, hand-drawn maps in his hand. Cartography was a secret passion of his, a way to find order in a chaotic world. He was so engrossed in tracing the old boundary lines on a fragile parchment map that he didn't sense the other Alpha's approach until he was almost upon him. "I know you've been sniffing around my territory, Ezra," Carter growled. He emerged from the dense woods, his posture a study in aggressive dominance, his scent radiating hostility. Ezra looked up, his expression unruffled. He carefully folded his precious map and tucked it into his jacket. "Our shared border is a matter of treaty, Carter, not your personal property. I am free to walk it, just as you are." "This isn't just about the borders, and you know it," Carter snarled, stepping closer, deliberately invading Ezra's personal space. "I heard you were seen near the falls this morning. Stay away from Isla. She's none of your concern." Ezra's calm demeanor didn't waver, but a dangerous glint entered his gray eyes. "The last I heard, you cast her aside in a rather public and brutal fashion. An alpha's mate is his to protect. A wolf he has rejected is free. What she does now and who she chooses to speak to is her business, not yours. The tension between them became a palpable thing, a crackling energy in the air. It was a storm of old grudges, political disputes, and now a new and volatile jealousy.
She is still of my pack, Carter bit out, his fists clenching at his sides. And I'm warning you, Ezra, leave her alone. A warning? Ezra allowed a small, cold smile to touch his lips. You are not in a position to give me warnings, Carter. Perhaps you should focus less on the women you've thrown away and more on the shaky alliances your father left you. With that final pointed barb, Ezra turned and walked away, leaving Carter standing there, seething with a fury that was as potent as it was powerless. As Ezra walked back toward his cabin, a grim sense of determination settled over him. He had initially felt only empathy for the girl at the waterfall, but now, after Carter's possessive display, it had become something more. This was no longer just about a rivalry between packs. Carter had made it personal. Chapter 6. 2 days later, Ezra found Isla. He didn't approach her at her home or in the pack center. He knew that would put her in an impossible position. Instead, he waited near the bookstore she frequented, a silent observer. When she emerged, looking pale and lost, he approached her quietly. Isla, he said softly. She started, her eyes widening in recognition. Ezra, what are you doing here? I was hoping I could persuade you to take a walk with me, he said, offering a small, unthreatening smile. In the neutral forest. No pack politics, no prying eyes, just a walk. She was hesitant, her gaze flickering around nervously, but something in his steady, respectful demeanor swayed her. She agreed, and they walked in comfortable silence for a while, the autumn leaves crunching under their boots. How are you? He finally asked, his voice gentle. I'm surviving, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. She stared at the path ahead. It's my wolf I'm worried about. She's been so quiet since it happened. It's like a part of me has gone to sleep and I can't wake it up. Ezra nodded thoughtfully, his expression full of understanding. A wolf's spirit is intrinsically tied to its heart. When the heart is wounded so deeply, the wolf retreats to heal. It's an act of self-preservation. He glanced at her, his gray eyes sincere and kind. My own wolf is not a creature of passion and fire like Carter's. He values patience and endurance. He knows that true strength isn't measured by how loudly you can roar, but by how long you can withstand the silence. His words resonated deep within her, offering a perspective she hadn't considered. It wasn't that her wolf was broken, she was healing. The thought was a small comfort, a single ray of light in her overwhelming darkness. Their path led them to a deep chasm. A scar in the earth spanned by a rickety, ancient-looking rope bridge. The wind whistled through the canyon, making the bridge sway ominously. Isla froze instantly, a primal fear of heights seizing her, making her legs feel like lead. I can't, she whispered, her voice tight with panic, as she backed away from the edge. I can't cross that. It's okay, Isla said immediately, his voice a soothing balm on her frayed nerves. We can turn back. There's no pressure. He stood beside her, solid and calm. But then, after a moment, he held out his hand. Or, he said softly, we can cross it together, one step at a time. I promise you I won't let you fall. She looked from the swaying bridge to his outstretched hand, and then into his steady, patient eyes. There was no challenge there, no ego, just a quiet offering of support. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, she placed her trembling hand in his. His grip was firm, warm, and profoundly reassuring. He led the way, his steps sure and even. Don't look down, he instructed gently. Just look at me. Focus on my voice. Step by terrifying step, they made their way across, the bridge groaning and swaying beneath them. She kept her eyes locked on him, her entire world narrowing to the solid presence of the man leading her through her fear. On the other side, she stumbled onto solid ground, her legs weak, her body flushed with adrenaline and an overwhelming sense of relief. And then, a sound she thought she'd lost bubbled up from her chest, a genuine, unrestrained laugh. He smiled, a true, warm smile that lit up his serious face. See? You're stronger than you think. The moment was perfect, a small, fragile bubble of peace. And then, It was shattered. Her phone, tucked deep in her jacket pocket, began to buzz. She pulled it out, her heart tightening into a painful knot when she saw the name on the screen. Carter. The impulse to answer was a painful, conditioned reflex. A part of her, the foolish, hopeful part, still craved the sound of his voice. But she looked at Ezra, at his patient, steady presence, at the man who had just guided her through her fear instead of being the cause of it. The choice, suddenly, was startlingly clear. With a decisive swipe of her thumb, she silenced the call, rejecting not just the man, but the chaos he represented. She placed the phone face down on a rock, choosing this new, fragile peace. Tonight was about taking a step forward, not being dragged back into the past. Chapter 7. The annual Harvest Moon Gala was a mandatory event for every member of the Blackwood Pack. It was an evening of forced mingling, political posturing, and celebrating a bounty Isla couldn't feel in her own empty heart. She had tried to get out of it, but her mother had insisted, her voice tight with concern over Isla insulating herself. So here she was, in a deep blue dress that felt like a costume, a fake smile plastered on her face, feeling more alone than ever in a room full of hundreds. She was trying to discreetly make her way to a secluded balcony when a hand closed around her arm. She turned, her heart plummeting when she saw Carter. He looked haggard and desperate, his usual impeccable confidence replaced by a wild, haunted look in his eyes. "Isla, we need to talk," he said, his voice low and urgent, and his grip on her arm too tight. His public approach was already drawing the curious, whispering attention of nearby pack members. "Carter, not here," she pleaded, trying to pull her arm away. "People are watching." "Let them watch," he said, his voice rising slightly in desperation. "I don't care. I only care about you. I made a mistake, a terrible, unforgivable mistake." Before she could process his dramatic, public plea, a calm, familiar voice cut through the tension. "Alpha Carter, I believe the lady asked you to let her go." They both turned. Ezra stood there, looking regal and imposing in a dark, tailored suit. His presence was a stark contrast to Carter's unraveling emotional state. The moment Carter saw him, his desperation curdled into pure, unadulterated rage. "What in the hell is he doing here?" he snarled, his eyes flashing dangerously. He looked from Ezra to Isla, a dark suspicion dawning on his face. "Is this what this is about? You left me for him?" "Carter, stop it," Isla begged, her face burning with humiliation as the whispers around them grew louder. "This has nothing to do with him." Ezra stepped forward, his expression impassive, though Isla could see a muscle twitching in his jaw. "I am here on an official invitation from your father to discuss the ongoing treaty negotiations, Carter," he stated, his voice carrying clearly in the suddenly quiet room. "This conversation does not concern you." "Everything concerning her concerns me," Carter shot back, his possessiveness on full, ugly display. Seeing the situation spiraling into a full-blown diplomatic incident, Ezra gave Isla a brief apologetic look. "Forgive me," he murmured, before giving a slight bow and quietly excusing himself, melting back into the crowd. He was de-escalating, but it felt like a retreat, leaving her alone with the wolf at the door. The moment he was gone, Carter turned back to Isla, his face a toxic mask of pain and possessive fury. "I can't do this, Isla. I can't watch him circle you like a vulture. You are mine." He grabbed both of her hands, his grip desperate. "Make me a promise, right here, right now. Promise me you won't see him again, that you'll cut him out of your life completely. Promise me. And I'll fight for us. I'll fight my father, the council, everyone. But you have to choose. It's him, or it's me." The ultimatum, delivered so publicly, hit her like a physical slap. He wasn't asking for her forgiveness. He was demanding her fealty. He was trying to cage her again. "You can't ask me that, Carter," she said, her voice shaking but firm as she pulled her hands from his grasp. "You have no right. I won't promise you that. You don't get to control my life." "So, you are choosing him," he whispered, his face falling in disbelief and raw, wounded pride. "No," she said, her resolve hardening into a shield around her aching heart. I am choosing me, and that means, for once and for all, I am not choosing you. She turned her back on him and walked away, not looking back, leaving him standing there alone and exposed amidst the shocked and silent whispers of his own pack. Chapter 8. The news spread through the territories like a shockwave, a whispered rumor that quickly became a confirmed, horrifying fact. Alpha Carter of the Blackwood Pack had issued a formal Alpha challenge to Alpha Ezra of the Crescent Moon Pack. The challenge, meant to be a sanctioned ritualistic display of dominance, had devolved into a brutal, unsanctioned fight on the disputed borderlands. A raw, bloody brawl fueled by generations of hatred. Isla's heart felt like it had stopped in her chest when Chloe burst into her apartment with the news. She'd spent the day after the gala in a numb haze, but this violent escalation shattered her stupor. This was her fault.
Frantic, she drove to the neutral territory, her mind replaying their confrontations. She found Ezra in the same rustic cabin he'd been staying in, his face a swollen, bruised mess. His lip was split, a nasty cut above his eye was stitched closed, and his knuckles were raw and bloody. He was shirtless, and she could see the dark, angry bruises blooming across his ribs. Marcus was daubing an antiseptic on a gash on his shoulder, his own face grim. "What did you do?" she cried, her voice breaking as she rushed to his side, her hand hovering over his bruised cheek before she pulled it back, afraid to touch him. "I finished what he started," Ezra said, his voice a low, rough rasp. He winced as Marcus pressed a little too hard. "For now." "Why?" she asked, tears of frustration and fear welling in her eyes. "Why couldn't you just walk away? This is insane." Ezra looked at her then, and despite the pain and the swelling, his gray eyes were sharp and serious. "Walking away is not always an option, Isla. Not for an Alpha. This isn't just about you anymore. It was never just about you. This is about him, his aggression, his belief that might makes right. He challenged me, and to refuse would have been a sign of weakness my pack cannot afford. This isn't about leadership, Ezra. This is about ego," she shot back, her voice trembling. "This is about two men fighting over a woman who doesn't want to be fought over." "Is that what you think this is?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. He slowly rose to his feet, ignoring Marcus's protest. He stood before her, battered but unbroken. "This rivalry began before either of us was born. Carter's father, Alpha Darius, was a tyrant. He ruled the Blackwood Pack with fear and aggression. He stole land from smaller packs, broke treaties, and believed power was the only currency that mattered. My father, Alpha Theron, believed in patience, in strategy, in building alliances through respect, not intimidation. They were oil and water, and their hatred for one another poisoned everything." He took a step closer, his gaze intense. "Carter is his father's son. He learned everything he knows about being an Alpha at Darius's knee. He believes he is entitled to whatever he wants, land, power, people. I am my father's son. I believe in protecting what is mine and honoring the boundaries of others. We have been at odds since we were pups, clashing over territory, over ideals, over the right way to lead. You," he said, his voice softening slightly, "you just became the new battleground. You represent a choice he made and then regretted, and his pride can't handle it. For him, this is about possession. For me," he paused, his eyes searching hers, "it's about stopping a bully from getting what he wants yet again." His words painted a picture so much bigger and more complex than she had ever imagined. This wasn't a simple love triangle. It was a war of dynasties, of ideologies, of history repeating itself, and she was trapped in the bloody, violent crossfire. "This has to stop," she whispered, her voice filled with despair. "He won't stop," Ezra said, his expression grim. "Not until one of us is broken. And Isla," he looked at her, the conviction in his eyes chilling her to the bone, "I do not break." She looked at his bruised and broken face and realized with a sickening, terrifying certainty that this was far from over. The fight hadn't ended anything. It had only been the opening salvo in a war she never wanted to be a part of. Chapter 9. The confrontation with Ezra left Isla feeling hollowed out, as if she were a spectator to her own life's destruction. She couldn't let it stand. She had to face Carter. She drove to the Blackwood pack house, her hands shaking on the wheel, her resolve a fragile, flickering flame. She stormed past the guards at the entrance, her own fury giving her a strength she didn't know she possessed. She found Carter in his private office, pacing like a caged wolf. He wasn't bruised like Ezra, a testament to his victory in the fight. But there was a wild, manic energy about him that was far more frightening than any physical injury. When he saw her, a triumphant, possessive smile spread across his face. "Isla," he said, moving toward her, "I knew you'd come. You see now, don't you? I'm the stronger Alpha. I did this for you, to protect you." "Protect me?" I scoffed, the sound incredulous and sharp. "You call that brutal, savage display protection? You're tearing me apart, Carter. This rivalry, this obsession you both have with destroying each other, it's destroying me and the process." He needed to be taught a lesson, Carter insisted, his voice rising, his eyes blazing with self-righteous fire. He needed to learn to stay away from what is mine. "I am not yours," I screamed, words ripping from my throat. "I am not a territory to be conquered or a prize to be won. I am a person." It was then that she knew. There was only one way to end this. She couldn't reason with them individually. Their hatred for each other was a blindfold, making them incapable of seeing the damage they were causing. She had to force them to see it together. She pulled out her phone. "The neutral territory," she said, her voice cold and commanding, channeling an authority she didn't feel. "At the old rope bridge, 1 hour, both of you. If either of you has any respect left for me at all, you'll be there." She turned and left before he could argue. An hour later, she stood on her side of the chasm, the rickety bridge swaying in the wind between her and the two alphas who had arrived minutes apart, standing on the opposite cliff edge like rival kings surveying their battlefield. They glared at each other, the air thick with their animosity. "I am not doing this anymore, Isla," she shouted across the windy expanse, her voice strong and clear. "I am not going to be the excuse for your pathetic war. I can't live like this, torn between the two of you. I'm asking you both, as the woman you both claim to care about, to stop this fight. End it, now." "That's not how this works, Isla," Carter yelled back, his voice urgent. "You have to choose. You can't just stand on the sidelines and wish it away. Choose me. Choose our pack. I love you." "She deserves better than a reckless alpha who rules with his fists and breaks the hearts of those who love him," Ezra countered, his voice a low, firm rumble that carried across the chasm. "Choose me, Isla. Choose a future of stability, of respect. Let me protect you from him." They both looked at her, their demands echoing in the wind, forcing her into the impossible corner she had tried so desperately to escape. They didn't want peace. They wanted to win, and she was the victory flag. Her heart, which she thought couldn't possibly break any further, shattered into a million infinitesimal pieces. But in that absolute breaking, she found a strange, liberating clarity. She was not a prize. She was not a choice. "I'm not choosing," she called out, her voice quiet now, but filled with a new, unshakable finality. "I'm not choosing either of you. I am not choosing your pacts, your politics, or your pathetic, ancient war. I'm done." Tears streamed down her face, whipped away by the harsh wind. She looked at both of them one last time, the man who had broken her heart and the man who had helped her begin to heal, both now just architects of her pain. With a heart-wrenching sob, she turned her back on the chasm, on the bridge, on them. She walked away, leaving them standing on opposite sides of the divide, alone with their hatred, finally and completely rejected. Chapter 10. Isla sat on the floor of her bedroom, surrounded by half-packed boxes and the ghosts of a life she was about to leave behind. The 2 days since the confrontation at the bridge had been a blur of sleepless nights and hollow, aching days. The initial, liberating strength she'd felt in walking away had faded, leaving behind the crushing weight of her decision. She had been haunted by their faces, Carter's shocked disbelief, Ezra's pained resignation. But beneath the grief, a harder, more resolute feeling was beginning to form: survival. She couldn't stay here. Every corner of the town, every familiar face was a reminder of what she had lost, of the war she had been a part of. She was suffocating in their rivalry, drowning in their pride and her own fear. To stay would be to slowly disintegrate, to let their conflict define the rest of her life. She refused. Her phone, which she had been silent for 48 hours, buzzed on the floor beside her.
It was Chloe. Isla let it ring for a few times before answering, her voice thick from crying and lack of sleep. Hey. Isla? Oh, thank the goddess. Chloe's voice was a flood of relief. I've been so worried. Are you okay? The whole pack is talking. I'm leaving, Chloe. Isla interrupted, the words coming out flat and final. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Leaving? Leaving the pack? Isla, you can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life, Isla replied, a fresh wave of tears blurring her vision. I can't heal here. I can't breathe here. Every time I close my eyes, I see them. I feel like I'm being torn in two. I need to go somewhere where I'm not Carter's ex or Ezra's whatever I was to him. I need to just be Isla. Where will you go? Chloe asked, her voice soft with worry. I don't know yet, Isla admitted, looking at the empty boxes. North, maybe, to the wild territories. Somewhere I can be alone. Somewhere I can hear my own wolf again. Okay, Chloe said, her voice firm with a support that brought a fresh sting to Isla's eyes. Okay, I get it. You do what you have to do to save yourself. You are the strongest person I know, Isla. Don't you ever forget that.
After they hung up, Isla felt a small bit of her strength return. Chloe's unwavering belief in her was the lifeline she desperately needed. She turned to the small writing desk in the corner of her room. She had to do one last thing. It was cowardly, she knew, to do this with letters, but she couldn't face them again. She couldn't risk their words, their pleas, pulling her back in. The act of writing was a painful, cathartic release. Each word was a tear, each sentence a final goodbye to a chapter of her life. She poured her heart, her pain, and her final, resolute decision onto the pages. To Carter, she wrote, Carter, I don't know if you'll ever understand the depth of the wound you left when you told me I wasn't enough. You broke my heart, but in a way, you also woke me up. You showed me that I could love fiercely, that I had a fire inside me I'd forgotten was there. I will always remember the man in the bookstore, the man who saw me when no one else did. I hope, for your sake, that you find him again. But I cannot be a part of your world, a world where love is a strategy and hearts are acceptable casualties. I need to find a way to heal mine, far away from you and the ghost of what we were. I hope you find the peace your soul is so clearly at war with. Goodbye. Isla. To Ezra, she wrote, Ezra, you found me at my lowest point, a stranger by a waterfall, and you showed me a kindness I thought no longer existed. You were patient when I was broken and strong when I was afraid. You helped me cross a bridge I never thought I could, and I will never, ever forget that. But I see now that our connection, as real as it felt, was built on the battlefield of your rivalry with him. I cannot be a pawn in your war, no matter how noble you believe your cause to be. To be with you would be to choose a side, and I am done with sides. I am choosing peace. Thank you for showing me a glimpse of it. I hope you find a victory that is worth more than just defeating your rival. I wish you well. Isla. She folded the letters and sealed them in plain envelopes. A profound, aching sadness settled over her, but beneath it there was a quiet sense of rightness. This wasn't the peace of a happy resolution, but the peace of a decision made. The peace of choosing herself. The next morning, in the pre-dawn darkness, Isla packed the last of her belongings into her car. She left the letters with Chloe, with instructions to deliver them after she was long gone. With one last, lingering look at the apartment that held so many memories, both blissful and agonizing, she slipped away, leaving her old life behind. She got in her car and drove. The road ahead stretched out like a blank, terrifying and hopeful canvas. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she was finally moving forward, on her own terms. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, a single, vital question lingered in her mind. Could she ever truly be free from them, or was this just the beginning of a different, more lonely chapter in their twisted fate?
The silence in Alpha Carter's opulent office was a suffocating, heavy thing. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the Blackwood packlands, his back rigid, staring unseeingly at the sprawling territory he was destined to command. In his hand he held a single sheet of elegant stationery, the paper crinkled from the force of his grip. He had read Isla's letter a dozen times, and with each reading the words etched themselves deeper into his soul, a litany of his failure. I hope you find the peace your soul is so clearly at war with. A raw, guttural roar of frustration and anguish ripped from his chest. He spun around, his control finally snapping, and swept his arm across his massive oak desk. Papers, awards, and a crystal decanter of whiskey went flying, crashing against the far wall in a symphony of destruction. The sound was momentarily satisfying, a physical manifestation of the chaos raging inside him, but it was fleeting. It did nothing to silence her words. "She's gone," he breathed, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. It wasn't a question, it was a verdict. His father, Alpha Darius, had been standing in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. He was a formidable wolf, older but with the same predatory build as his son, his face a mask of cold disappointment. He stepped over a shattered glass, his expression unyielding. "Good," Darius stated, his voice like stones grinding together. "The girl was a weakness, a sentimental distraction. Now you can focus on your duties, on finding a suitable Luna with a proper bloodline." Carter whirled on him, his eyes blazing with grief-fueled fury. "Weakness? She had more strength in her heart than you have in your entire body. She was not a distraction. She was everything." "She was a nobody," Darius roared back, his alpha power flooding the room, a crushing force meant to demand submission. "She made you soft, made you question my decisions. I did you a favor by pressuring you to end it. It's a lesson every true alpha must learn. Sentiment is a liability. You will get over this dalliance." Carter stared at his father, and for the first time he didn't see a powerful leader. He saw a hollow man, a bully who mistook cruelty for strength. Isla's letter had been a key, and it had just unlocked a door in his mind, revealing the ugly, rotten truth of the world he'd been raised in. This was the world that had deemed her not strong enough. Miles away, in the quiet, strategic heart of the Crescent Moon territory, Alpha Ezra sat in his study, Isla's second letter resting on the polished desk before him. The room was orderly, filled with books and maps, a reflection of his own methodical mind. Unlike Carter's violent explosion, Ezra's reaction was a deep, silent implosion. Her words, "I cannot be a pawn in your war," were a precise and devastating strike against the very core of his identity. He had always prided himself on his logic, his ability to see the whole board, to outmaneuver his opponents. He had seen Isla as a person, yes, but he had also seen her as a strategic asset, a way to finally gain an advantage over Carter. He had never considered that his protection, his patience, could feel just like another form of control to her. His beta, Marcus, entered the study quietly, his face etched with concern. "Ezra? The scouts have reported back on the border patrols. Carter is running them ragged. It seems he's agitated." Ezra didn't look up from the letter. "He has reason to be," he murmured. "She's gone." Marcus was silent for a moment. "I see," he said softly. "Then perhaps it is for the best. An entanglement with a Blackwood wolf was always a risk." "She wasn't an entanglement, Marcus," Ezra said, his voice quiet but sharp with a pain that surprised even himself. He finally looked up, his gray eyes clouded with a profound sorrow and a dawning, uncomfortable self-awareness. "She said I offered her a glimpse of peace, but all I really did was offer her a different cage." He let out a long, slow breath. "We need to rethink the treaty, all of it. We are not approaching this from a position of strength anymore. We are approaching this as a pack that needs to learn how to make peace, not just win wars." Marcus stared at his alpha, shocked. For years, their strategy had been about containing the Blackwood threat, about being smarter, stronger, better. This was something entirely new. It was the first painful seed of change, planted by a girl who had chosen to walk away from it all. Chapter 12. The road north was a ribbon of cracked asphalt that unspooled into a vast, unforgiving wilderness. For the first few days, Isla drove until her eyelids were heavy and her fuel tank was low, surviving on gas station coffee and a dwindling supply of granola bars. The hum of the engine was a hypnotic drone that almost drowned out the screaming in her head. But when she finally ran out of road, deep in the foothills of the Titan Tooth Mountains, the silence that descended was absolute and terrifying. She was truly alone. Her car, a relic from a life that no longer existed, was useless here. She packed a single bag with essentials, a knife, a flint, a water filter, the last of her food, and began to walk. The first week was a brutal education. Every instinct she possessed, honed by a lifetime in a structured pack, was wrong here. The forest was not a park. It was a kingdom of predators and prey, and she was an anomaly, an outsider who smelled of civilization and sorrow. Her first attempt at hunting was a disaster. She spooked a rabbit from 100 yards away, her approach clumsy and loud. She spent a night shivering under a rocky overhang, soaked by a relentless, freezing rain, her fire-starting skills proving woefully inadequate. She was hungry, she was cold, and she was terrified. The confident girl who had walked away from 2 alphas felt like a distant, foolish memory. Her wolf, the part of her that she'd hoped would reawaken in the wild, remained stubbornly dormant, a frightened, whimpering presence in the back of her mind. It was as if Carter's rejection had severed a vital connection, leaving her feeling half-formed, a shifter who couldn't fully connect with her other half. On the 8th day, her hunger, a sharp, gnawing pain in her belly, she was tracking a deer, her movements finally growing quieter, more instinctual. The scent of the animal was thick in the air, but underneath it, another scent emerged, musky, dangerous, and wrong. Feral. Before she could react, it burst from the undergrowth. It was a rogue wolf, larger than any she had ever seen, its fur matted and scarred, its eyes burning with a rabid, insane light. This wasn't a pack wolf. This was a monster, cast out and driven mad by solitude. It lunged, its massive jaws snapping just inches from her throat. Instinct, pure and primal, took over. She threw herself sideways, scrambling away, her heart exploding in her chest. There was no time to think, no time to plan. It was on her in a second, its weight crashing into her, its claws tearing at her jacket. And in that moment of pure, unadulterated terror, something inside her broke. A dam of grief and fear and pain that had been holding her wolf captive shattered. A surge of raw, untamed power flooded her veins. It wasn't the calm, contented purr she had felt with Carter, nor the quiet, watchful presence she had known her whole life. This was something new. It was a roar. Her own shift was instantaneous and violent. Bones snapped and reformed, her skin stretched, and a wave of agony and ecstasy washed over her. She emerged in her wolf form, sleek and silver-furred, smaller than the rogue, but wiry and fast. The feral monster paused, surprised by her sudden transformation. It had expected a helpless human, not another wolf. They circled each other, a low growl rumbling in Isla's chest, a sound she had never made before. It was a sound of defiance. The rogue lunged again, but this time she was ready. She met him not with brute force, but with the speed she didn't know she possessed. She dodged, weaved, and snapped at his flank, her movements fluid and desperate. The fight was a blur of teeth and claws. He was stronger, his bites meant to crush bone, but she was smarter, more agile. She was fighting for more than just a meal. She was fighting for her right to exist, to be more than just a memory or a regret. She was fighting for herself. She managed to sink her teeth into the rogue's leg, tearing a deep gash. He howled in pain and fury, shaking her off violently. She landed hard, her side screaming in protest, but she scrambled back to her feet. He limped towards her, his mad eyes promising death, but the fight was gone from him, replaced by the grim calculation of a predator who knew when a hunt was no longer worth the cost. With a final, hateful snarl, he turned and melted back into the woods, leaving Isla standing alone, panting, bleeding, and trembling in the silent forest. She stood there for a long time, the adrenaline slowly ebbing away, leaving a profound, aching exhaustion in its wake. She had survived, on her own. She had faced a monster and had not broken.
As she limped towards the shelter of a cave, her own wolf's presence filled her mind. No longer whimpering, no longer dormant. It was awake, it was scarred, and it was, for the first time, truly, undeniably, hers.
For weeks, Isla journeyed deeper into the mountains, following the path of a winding, stone-filled river. The encounter with the feral rogue had changed her. The fear was still there, a constant companion, but it was no longer paralyzing. It was a tool, a whetstone that sharpened her senses and honed her instincts. She learned the rhythms of the wilderness, the patterns of the wind, the language of the birds, the subtle shifts in the earth that signaled the presence of other creatures. Her wolf was a constant, powerful presence now, a silent partner in the grim dance of survival. They were a single, cohesive unit, thinking and moving as one. She was tracking a mountain goat along a high ridge, her paws silent on the rocky ground, when she first saw the smoke. It was a thin, gray tendril curling into the crisp morning sky from a valley nestled deep within the peaks. Her first instinct was to flee. Smoke meant shifters, and shifters meant packs, territories, and alphas, the very things she had run from. But she was also bone-weary. Her supplies were gone, and the first snows of winter were beginning to dust the highest peaks. A part of her, the part that still remembered warmth and community, was drawn to that fragile plume of smoke. With extreme caution, she made her way down into the valley. What she found was not the heavily guarded, aggressive fortress she expected. The settlement was built into the mountainside itself, a series of interconnected caves and stone dwellings that seemed to have grown organically from the rock. It was peaceful, almost silent, save for the sound of the wind and the distant chime of a hammer on metal. She was still hidden in the trees, observing, when two figures emerged from one of the larger caves. They were both she-wolves, their hair streaked with gray, their faces etched with the wisdom of age. They moved with a calm, deliberate authority that needed no bluster or posturing. They stopped, and one of them turned her head, her gaze seeming to pierce the shadows and land directly on Isla's hiding spot. "You can come out, child," the she-wolf called, her voice clear and strong, carrying easily on the wind. There was no lie in her tone. Isla hesitated for only a moment before stepping out of the forest in her human form, her tattered clothes and gaunt frame a testament to her long journey. The she-wolf who had spoken had eyes the color of a winter sky, sharp and perceptive. She said, her expression softening with a hint of empathy, "I am Thora, and this is the home of the Stone River Pack. You are a long way from your own lands." Over a bowl of hot, hearty stew in a warm, firelit cavern, Isla found herself telling Thora her story. She omitted the names, speaking only of a powerful Alpha who had broken her heart and a rival who had offered a different kind of cage. She spoke of the suffocating rivalry and her desperate flight to find herself. Thora listened patiently, her hands wrapped around a clay mug of herbal tea, her gaze never wavering. When Isla finished, her voice raw with unshed tears, the elder she-wolf was silent for a long time.
"Here," Thora said finally, her voice a low, comforting rumble. "We do things differently. We have no single alpha. Power that is concentrated in one set of hands will always, eventually corrupt. It is the nature of our kind." She gestured around the large communal cavern where other pack members were mending tools, weaving blankets, and preparing food. Males and females worked side by side, their interactions easy and respectful. "We are ruled by a council of elders, those who have proven their wisdom and commitment to the pack regardless of their gender or strength. Decisions are made together for the good of all. A lone wolf's strength is in their survival. A pack's strength is in its community." "You would offer me sanctuary?" Isla asked, her voice filled with a hope she hadn't felt in months. "We will offer you a place to rest and heal," Thora corrected gently. "Sanctuary must be earned. Respect is our currency here, child, not dominance. Stay, learn our ways. Find the strength that is yours and yours alone. Then we will see what the future holds." Isla looked at the wise, powerful she-wolf, at the peaceful community around her, and felt a profound sense of coming home, not to a place she had been, but to a place she was always meant to find. This was a new model of pack life, one based on balance and mutual respect, not fear and submission. It was a world away from the toxic masculinity of the Blackwood pack. And for the first time, Isla believed she might not just survive, but truly thrive. Chapter 14. The winds of change, set in motion by Isla's departure, were beginning to blow through the territories she left behind. In the Blackwood pack, Carter was a ghost haunting his own life. He performed his duties with a grim, mechanical efficiency, but the fire in his eyes had been replaced by a cold, hollow ache. Isla's letter, which he kept locked in his desk, was a constant, tormenting reminder of his monumental failure. You were at war with yourself, and you chose to make me the casualty. The truth of her words was a poison he couldn't get out of his system. He began to see his father's leadership through new, disillusioned eyes. He saw the fear in the eyes of the pack members when Darius entered a room. He saw the wastefulness of their aggressive posturing, the broken alliances, the simmering resentments from smaller packs they had bullied into submission. This wasn't strength. It was a brittle, fragile tyranny, one strong wind away from shattering. The breaking point came during a council meeting. A family of farmers on the northern border had lost half their crop to an early frost and were petitioning the Alpha for a share of the pack's emergency stores to survive the winter. Darius scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. The pack's stores are for warriors, not for incompetent farmers who cannot read the signs of the seasons. They were weak. They will learn from their hardship, or they will perish. The pack will be stronger for it. A year ago, Carter would have nodded in agreement. Today, he felt a wave of nausea. He looked at the farmer's desperate, pleading face and saw not weakness, but a man trying to provide for his family against impossible odds. He saw Isla's quiet strength, a resilience his father could never comprehend.
"No," Carter said, his voice quiet but clear in the suddenly silent room. Every head turned to stare at him. Darius's eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. "What did you say, boy?" "I said no," Carter repeated, standing up to his full height, his voice gaining strength. "They are our pack. We are sworn to protect them, to provide for them. Their weakness is our weakness. Their strength is our strength. Denying them aid is not a show of power, it is an act of cowardice. They will have their share of the stores." The confrontation was epic. Father and son, Alpha and heir, locked in a battle of wills in front of the entire council. Darius unleashed the full, terrifying force of his Alpha command, an invisible pressure designed to bring any wolf to their knees. But Carter stood his ground. Fueled by a potent mixture of grief, guilt, and a desperate need to become a man Isla could have respected, he resisted. He did not bow. For the first time in his life, he did not submit. He did not win the argument that day, but he planted a seed of dissent, a seed of a new way of thinking that would soon take root in the hearts of a pack that was growing weary of living in fear. Meanwhile, in the Crescent Moon territory, Ezra was enacting a revolution of his own. Isla's letter had been a mirror, forcing him to confront the arrogance that lay beneath his calm, strategic exterior. "You offered me a different cage." He realized he had viewed the Blackwood pack and Carter as an obstacle to be overcome, a problem to be solved rather than a community of wolves who were also suffering under poor leadership. He shocked his own council by scrapping the meticulously crafted, advantage-heavy treaty he had been preparing. In its place, he drafted a new one. It was radical in its fairness. It proposed a redrawing of the disputed border based on historical claims and natural resources benefiting both packs. It suggested joint patrols to combat the growing threat of feral rogues. It was a genuine offer of peace, not a veiled power play. "Ezra, this is madness," one of his senior council members protested. "You are surrendering our advantage. They will see this as weakness and exploit it. For generations, we have treated them as an enemy to be defeated. And for generations, we have been locked in a cold war that has bled both our packs of resources and spirit.
What if we treated them as a neighbor to be reconciled with? Isla saw the war, and she showed me that the only way to truly win is to refuse to fight. This is not an act of weakness, it is an act of strength. He sent the treaty to the Blackwood Pack addressed not to Alpha Darius, but to the Council as a whole, an unprecedented breach of protocol. He knew it was a long shot, a wild gamble, but it was a move made not from his head, but from a part of him that Isla had reawakened. His heart. He was done playing the game. It was time to change the rules. Chapter 15. The Valley of the Stone River Pack became Isla's crucible and her sanctuary. The initial weeks were a period of quiet observation. She worked alongside the other pack members, her hands, once soft and uncalloused, growing strong from grinding grain, tanning hides, and carving tools.
She listened during the communal meals, absorbing their stories, their laws, their fundamentally different way of life. There was no posturing here, no constant struggle for dominance. An individual's worth was measured by their contribution to the pack, their wisdom, their kindness, not by the ferocity of their snarl. Thora became her mentor. The old she-wolf was a living library of shifter lore, teaching Isla things she had never learned in the rigid, male-dominated hierarchy of the Blackwood Pack. She taught her how to truly listen to the forest, how to track not just with her nose, but with her paws, feeling the vibrations in the earth. She taught her about the history of lone wolves, the heresy of the free, as it was called in the old texts. Shifters who had chosen to break from their packs and live by their own laws. They are not all mad ferals like the one you encountered, Thora explained one evening as they sat by a fire, the stars a brilliant canopy above them. Some are philosophers, explorers, healers. They believe that the bond to an alpha, while providing security, can also be a leash, stifling a wolf's true potential. You, child, have the heart of a free wolf, even if you do not know it yet. Under Thora's guidance, Isla's connection to her own wolf deepened into a true partnership. She learned to control her shifting with a precision she had never thought possible, to partially shift, lengthening her claws, sharpening her hearing, enhancing her sight, without losing her human consciousness. Her wolf was no longer just an instinctual other half. It was an extension of her own will. She was not just surviving in the mountains, she was becoming a part of them. She was becoming formidable. Her transformation did not go unnoticed. One evening, the pack's governing council convened to discuss a pressing issue, a territorial dispute with a clan of mountain lions who were being driven into their valley by a harsh winter. The discussion was heated, with the younger, stronger wolves advocating for a direct, aggressive confrontation to drive the cats out. Isla, who had been sitting quietly in the back of the cavern, felt a compulsion to speak. She stood, her heart pounding, but her voice was clear and steady when she addressed the council. "Elders," she began, every eye turning to her, "I have observed the lions. They are not acting out of aggression, but desperation. Their traditional hunting grounds on the higher slopes are barren. Attacking them will only result in losses for both sides. They are mothers and fathers, trying to feed their young, just as we are." She took a breath, channeling Ezra's strategic thinking, but tempering it with the compassion she was learning here. What if, instead of fighting them for the valley, we share it? We could call a portion of our goat herd, leave it on the far ridge as an offering, a show of goodwill. It would feed them for weeks, long enough for the snows to recede. We would lose a few goats, but we would save the lives of our warriors and avoid a needless war. There was a stunned silence. Her proposal was unorthodox, going against the primal shifter instinct to defend territory at all costs. But Thora looked at her, a proud, knowing smile on her face. The elders debated for a long time, but Isla's logic, her calm and compassionate reasoning, won them over. They followed her plan. The offering was made, and the lions, after a period of wary observation, accepted it. A bloody conflict was averted.
That night, Thora formally invited Isla to take a seat on the council, not as a guest, but as a member. She had found her voice. She had proven her worth. She was no longer Isla of the Blackwood Pack, the rejected mate. She was Isla of the Stone River, and she was finally, truly home. Chapter 16. The peace Isla had found was a fragile thing, a single candle flame in a gathering storm. Far to the south, in the lawless Badlands, a new and terrifying power was rising. They called themselves the Shattered Claw, a rapidly growing band of rogue wolves bound together by a brutal, charismatic leader. His name was Malachi, an alpha who had been exiled from his own pack for his extreme ideologies. He preached a twisted gospel of shifter supremacy, believing that the old pack structures were weak, diluted by compassion and diplomacy. He believed in culling, in forcibly absorbing or destroying any pack he deemed unfit, leaving only the strong to rule. His followers were the dispossessed, the exiled, and the bloodthirsty, wolves who had been cast out for their violence and now found a prophet who celebrated their savagery. They were a disciplined, merciless army, and they were moving north. Their first target was a small, independent farming collective in the foothills, a neutral zone that had long served as a buffer between the Blackwood and Crescent Moon territories. The attack was not a raid, it was an annihilation. They descended at dusk, a wave of snarling fury, overwhelming the small defense force in minutes. They didn't just steal supplies, they slaughtered the livestock, burned the farms to the ground, and forcibly conscripted any able-bodied shifter into their ranks, branding them with their symbol, a jagged, three-taloned claw mark. The message was clear: submit or be erased. News of the massacre traveled fast, carried by the few terrified survivors who managed to escape. It sent a shockwave of fear through the region. This was not the work of a few disorganized ferals. This was a coordinated, military-style assault by a force with a purpose. In the Blackwood Pack, Darius saw the threat as an opportunity. He said, "This is the work of Crescent Moon," he roared in a council meeting, conveniently ignoring the survivor's testimony. "Ezra is too cowardly to face us directly, so he sends his feral dogs to harass our borders. This is an act of war. We will answer it in kind." But Carter, who had been receiving his own, more reliable intelligence from his personal scouts, knew the truth. He said, "It wasn't Ezra. They are called the Shattered Claw, and they are not an army of dogs. They are a legion of fanatics. They're coming for all of us." Ezra received the same reports, and his strategic mind immediately grasped the terrifying scale of the threat. The Shattered Claw was attacking the disputed lands first, a brilliant tactical move designed to exploit the long-standing rivalry between the two major packs. Malachi knew they would likely blame each other first, giving him time to consolidate his position before either could mount an effective defense.
"He's using our own history against us," Ezra explained grimly to a convened meeting of his top warriors. "He knows we are divided, and as long as we remain divided, he will pick us off one by one." The Shattered Claw established a crude fortress in the burned-out ruins of the farming collective, right on the doorstep of both packs. Their patrols became more brazen, pushing deeper into both Blackwood and Crescent Moon territory, testing their defenses, drawing their warriors into bloody skirmishes. They were not just an army, they were a plague, and the storm they represented was about to break over everyone. The fragile peace, the tentative seeds of change that Isla's departure had sown, were about to be trampled under the boots of an enemy who believed peace was the ultimate weakness. Chapter 17. The Shattered Claw's aggression escalated with terrifying speed. Their skirmishes were no longer simple probes. They were calculated, brutal assaults, designed to bleed the packs of their warriors and resources. A Blackwood lumber camp was raided, its defenders overwhelmed and slaughtered. A Crescent Moon hunting party was ambushed, and only one severely wounded survivor made it back. The air in both territories grew thick with the stench of fear and the ever-present threat of imminent all-out war.
In the Blackwood pack, Darius was in his element, whipping the pack into a frenzy of paranoid fury. "This is what comes of weakness," he bellowed from the council stage. "My son speaks of peace and aid, and this is the result. Our enemies see us as soft. We will meet this shattered claw on the field, and we will crush them under our heel. Blackwood stands alone. Blackwood needs no one." But Carter saw the folly in his father's pride. He had seen the reports, the casualty lists. His warriors were strong, but they were outnumbered, and Malachi's forces fought with a zealotry that was terrifying. To face them alone would be suicide. He looked at the faces of his pack, the fear in the eyes of the mothers, the grim resignation of the warriors who knew what they were up against. He thought of Isla's words about strength and cowardice. The truly cowardly act would be to send his pack to their deaths for the sake of his father's ego. He made a decision. It was the hardest, most humbling decision of his life. That night, under the cover of a new moon, Carter crossed the border into Crescent Moon territory. He was alone, carrying no weapons, only a white flag of truce. He was met at the border by a patrol led by Marcus, who looked at him with a mixture of shock and deep suspicion. "I am here to see your Alpha," he said, his voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil raging inside him. "It is a matter of survival for both our packs." He was led to Ezra's study. The two Alphas stood facing each other, the air between them thick with the weight of generations of hatred, their own personal rivalry, and the ghost of the woman they had both lost. It was Carter who broke the silence. He swallowed the bitter pill of his pride, a taste he was slowly getting used to. "My father is a fool," he said, the words stark and honest. "He intends to lead our pack into a suicidal war against Malachi. He will not listen to reason. He sees only what he wants to see." Ezra listened, his expression unreadable, his gray eyes searching Carter's for any sign of deception. "We cannot defeat the Shattered Claw alone," Carter continued, the admission costing him dearly. "Neither of us can. Our rivalry has left us both weakened, exposed. Malachi knows this. He is counting on us to destroy each other for him." He took a deep breath, the next words the most difficult of all. "I am here to propose an alliance, a temporary truce. Let the Blackwood and Crescent Moon packs fight side by side. Together, we might have a chance. Alone, we will be annihilated." Ezra was silent for a long, tense moment. Every instinct, every lesson he had ever learned screamed that this was a trap. The history between them was written in blood and betrayal. But he also saw the change in Carter. The arrogant, hut-headed youth he had fought was gone, replaced by a grim, resolute man weighed down by the burden of leadership. He remembered Isla's letter, her plea for them to stop the war. Perhaps this was the only way. "My council will call this madness," Ezra said finally, his voice a low rumble. "So will my father," Carter replied, a humorless smirk touching his lips. "It seems we finally have something in common." Ezra extended his hand. "An unholy alliance, then," he said. Carter grasped it, his grip firm. "To survival," he said. It was a historic, unthinkable moment. The two rival Alphas, their feud legendary, shaking hands in the dead of night, their pact sealed not by a treaty or a promise of friendship, but by the cold, hard reality of a common existential threat. Chapter 18. The first snows of winter had transformed the Stone River Valley into a pristine, silent wonderland, but the beauty of the landscape was a stark contrast to the growing unease within the pack. Travelers and fleeing refugees brought tales of the war in the south, of the brutal Shattered Claw and their scorched earth campaign. For weeks the conflict had seemed a distant problem, a violent storm on a far horizon, but now the storm was turning towards them. A wounded scout from a neutral prospectors clan stumbled into their valley, his body broken, his eyes wide with terror. He spoke of Malachi's latest decree. The Shattered Claw would cleanse the mountains of all abominations. This included the mountain lion clans, the scattered lone wolves, and any pack that did not adhere to the strict, singular alpha hierarchy. The Stone River Pack, with its governing council and peaceful ways, was at the top of their list. Thora convened an emergency council meeting. The mood in the great cavern was somber. She said, "Our ways are our strength, but our seclusion is now our greatest weakness. Malachi's warriors are legion. They are hardened by battle. We are a people of peace. We are no match for their savagery." Panic began to ripple through the cavern. They were trapped. To flee would be to perish in the harsh mountain winter. To stay would be to face certain annihilation. Isla listened, her heart a cold stone in her chest. She had come here to escape the war, but the war had followed her. She looked at the faces of the pack that had taken her in, that had taught her the true meaning of strength.
She thought of Thora's wisdom, the children she had played with, the community that had healed her soul. She would not let it be destroyed. An idea, desperate and terrifying, began to form in her mind, an idea that would mean facing the very past she had run from. She stood, and a hush fell over the council. "We are not warriors," she said, her voice clear and ringing with a conviction that surprised even herself. "But we are not without allies. I came from the South. I know the Alphas who rule there. I know their strengths, their weaknesses, their tactics." She looked directly at Thora. "The Blackwood Tack is fierce, their warriors unmatched in close-quarters combat. The Crescent Moon Pack is strategic, their archers and scouts legendary. Separately, they are fighting a losing battle against the Shattered Claw. But if they were united, and if they had a third ally, one that knows this terrain better than anyone—" The implication of her words hung in the air. Thora's eyes widened slightly. "You would go back?" she whispered. "I must," Isla said, her resolution solidifying. She was no longer the frightened girl who had stumbled out of the woods. She was a survivor, a strategist, a member of this council. They will not listen to a plea for help from a pack they've never heard of, but they might listen to me. She took a deep breath. "I will not go as a supplicant, begging for aid. I will go as an emissary of the Stone River Pack. I will go to forge a 3-pack alliance. It is our only hope." It was a staggering proposal. For her to return to the two men she had so publicly rejected, to face the maelstrom of emotion and history that awaited her, was a risk beyond measure. But as she stood before the council, her posture straight, her gaze unwavering, no one doubted her strength. She was not running from her past anymore. She was confronting it, not for love or for absolution, but for the survival of the people who had become her own. Thora looked at her, a deep pride shining in her ancient eyes, and nodded. "Go then, Isla of Stone River, go and face your demons, and may the mountain spirits guide your path." Chapter 19. The journey south was a stark reversal of the one that had brought her to the mountains. Isla traveled with a speed and confidence that would have been unthinkable months before. She was accompanied by 2 of Stone River's swiftest scouts, their mission urgent and fraught with peril. They moved like ghosts through the war-torn landscape, dodging Shattered Claw patrols and witnessing the brutal devastation they left in their wake. She sent word ahead, a simple, unsigned message delivered by a neutral fur trader. A summit is requested at the Old Rope Bridge. An emissary from the north brings a proposal concerning the Shattered Claw. Come alone. Trust is required. She stood on the Stone River side of the chasm, the bridge, once a symbol of her fear, now the chosen ground for a desperate diplomatic gambit. She was dressed not in the soft silks of her old life, but in the practical, hardened leather of a mountain scout. Her hair was braided back, her face was leaner, and her eyes held a calm, steely resolve.
They arrived minutes apart, just as they had before. Carter, Alpha of the Blackwood Pack. Ezra, Alpha of the Crescent Moon. They stopped dead when they saw her, their shock palpable even across the windy expanse. This was not the broken-hearted girl who had fled from them. This was a different woman entirely. Confident, powerful, and radiating an authority that was entirely her own. "Isla," Carter breathed, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't decipher. Ezra simply stared, his intelligent eyes taking in every detail of her transformation, a look of profound, sorrowful understanding on his face. "I am not the woman you knew," Isla called across the chasm, her voice clear and strong, carrying over the wind. "I am an emissary of the Stone River Pack, and I am here to offer you a way to win this war." Slowly, cautiously, the two alphas crossed the bridge to meet her. The reunion was a maelstrom of unspoken emotions, of regret and longing and pain, but there was no time for that. She laid out her proposal with a calm, irrefutable logic that would have made Ezra proud. She spoke of the Stone River Pack, their knowledge of the mountain passes, their skill as trackers and healers. She described how they could provide a sanctuary for the wounded, a secret route to flank Malachi's fortress, a third front in the war. A three-pack alliance, your warriors, Ezra's strategy, and our knowledge of the terrain. Together, we can destroy the Shattered Claw. Divided, they will annihilate us all. It was a radical plan, one built on a foundation of trust that never existed between their people. "How can we trust a pack of mountain dwellers we've never met?" Carter asked, though his question was directed at her, his eyes searching hers for the answer. "You can't trust them," Isla replied, meeting his gaze without flinching, "but you can trust me." The weight of that statement hung in the air. In that moment, she was not asking them to trust her because of their shared past or because of any lingering affection. She was asking them to trust her because of who she had become, a leader, a strategist, a survivor. She was the linchpin, the bridge not just between their two packs, but between the old world of dominance and the new world of cooperation she now represented. She saw the struggle in their eyes, Carter battling his ingrained pride and his father's legacy, Ezra wrestling with the strategic risk versus the potential reward. But they had both changed. Her departure had been the catalyst, and the brutal war had been the fort. They looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not a prize to be won, but an equal to be respected. "What are your terms?" Ezra asked, his voice quiet, signaling his acceptance. Carter looked from Ezra to Isla, and then he gave a slow, decisive nod. "Tell us the plan." In that moment, standing on the edge of a chasm between three worlds, Isla finally, truly understood her own strength. She hadn't just found herself in the mountains, she had forged herself into a leader, and she had come back not to be chosen, but to choose the path forward for them all.
The war against the Shattered Claw was brutal, a bloody, desperate campaign fought in the snow-choked passes and frozen forests of the disputed territories. But the alliance, once forged, proved to be a formidable weapon. Carter's warriors, fighting with a disciplined fury, formed the brutal front line. Ezra's archers and scouts, moving like phantoms through the trees, harried the enemy flanks and disrupted their supply lines. And the Stone River trackers, led by Isla, guided them through secret mountain paths, allowing them to stage surprise attacks and evacuate their wounded to the hidden safety of the valley. Isla was in the heart of it all. She was not a warrior in the way Carter was, but her strategic mind, honed by her time on the council and her intimate knowledge of the terrain, was indispensable. She became the nexus of the alliance, the one person who could speak to both Carter and Ezra, translating their different styles of leadership into a single cohesive strategy. They saw her day after day, risking her life, making hard decisions, earning the respect of warriors from all three packs. The final battle took place at the base of Malachi's crude fortress. It was a maelstrom of snarling wolves and clashing bodies. Malachi himself was a monster, a giant of a wolf who fought with a berserker's rage. He cut a bloody path through the Allied lines, heading straight for the command tent where the three leaders were directing the battle. Carter met him first, a clash of two titans. They fought with a savage intensity that shook the ground, but Malachi was stronger, his madness giving him an edge. He wounded Carter badly, tossing him aside. Ezra moved to defend him, using his speed and agility, but he too was no match for the rogue Alpha's raw power. As Malachi stood over the two fallen Alphas, a silver wolf shot out from the side, silent and swift as the winter wind. Isla. She didn't try to match his strength. She used her smaller size, her speed, her intimate knowledge of a wolf's anatomy. She dodged his clumsy, powerful swipes, sinking her teeth into the tendons of his leg, hamstringing him. He howled in pain and fury, turning on her. But in that moment of distraction, Carter and Ezra rose, wounded but not broken. They attacked as one, a seamless combination of Carter's power and Ezra's precision. Together, they brought the tyrant down. In the bloody aftermath, a new world was born. The shattered claw was broken, its fanaticism extinguished. In the Blackwood Pack, the council, having witnessed Carter's courage and his father's cowardly refusal to join the final battle, formally deposed Darius. Carter became the true Alpha, vowing to lead with a strength tempered by the humility he had learned. A permanent three-pack alliance was declared, with the disputed lands transformed into a shared territory, a symbol of their newfound unity. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in generations, it was hopeful. Weeks later, as the first thaws of spring began to melt the snow, they stood once more at the old rope bridge. First, Carter approached her. He was changed, the arrogance gone, replaced by a quiet, somber strength.
"I was a fool, Isla," he said, his voice raw with an emotion he no longer tried to hide. "I was a boy trying to be the man my father demanded, and I broke the best thing that ever happened to me. You were right about everything. You are the strongest person I have ever known." He reached out, but not to touch her. He simply offered a small, sad smile. "I'm not going to ask you for anything. I don't deserve to. All I can say is thank you, and I'm sorry. I hope you find all the happiness you deserve." It was a final, true act of letting her go, an acknowledgement of her freedom. He nodded to her, then to Ezra, and walked back across the bridge alone. Then Ezra stood before her. He looked at her, his gray eyes full of a deep, unwavering respect. "The Council of the New Alliance needs a third voice," he said, his voice quiet. "A voice of reason and compassion, a voice that understands all three of our worlds. They need you, Isla." He took her hand, his touch gentle and warm. "I'm not asking you to be my Luna. The time for that is past. I'm asking you to be my partner, my equal. Let's build this new world together." Isla looked at him, at the man who had shown her kindness in her darkest hour, who had learned and grown, who saw her not as a possession, but as a leader in her own right. She thought of her journey, of the broken girl at the waterfall and the strong woman she had become. Her wolf, calm and content within her, purred its approval. Her choice was finally free, clear, and entirely her own. With a smile that was full of hope for the future, she squeezed his hand. "Together," she agreed. And so Isla's long winter finally gave way to a new spring, her journey of self-discovery leading not to a prize, but to a partnership. But what do you think of her final choice? After all the heartache and growth, do you believe she ended up with the right Alpha? Or does a part of you still root for Carter's redemption? What would you have done differently if you were in Isla's shoes? Share, subscribe, and comment on your thoughts to show the authors some love and appreciation.